events, except for the fact that he doesn't anticipate them having any fans
Yeah.
or attendees at it. So I anticipate seeing Martinsville underneath the lights for sure.
Yeah, no doubt about it. So, maybe but stuff has gotten rescheduled, so we'll see how that all works out. But back to the Larson thing, and there's been a lot of discussion with that, and NASCAR's taken a beating on this from a lot of people. But guys, ladies, here's the bottom line: NASCAR did the indefinite suspension. And they talked about that there was going to have to be the sensitivity training and so forth. And we've seen guys come through this. NASCAR did not run him out of the 42 car, but there's big money involved here. I mean, you've got Credit One Bank, you've got McDonald's, you've got all of these people. NASCAR didn't do this to him.
Yeah, NASCAR didn't tell him to release release from the 42. That was a Chip Ganassi decision. They didn't call up Credit One and tell him to stop the relationship with Kyle Larson. That was a Credit One decision. Yep. They didn't call up McDonald's, say, hey, you need to cut your ties with Kyle Larson. It's almost, when I say a perfect storm, I mean a perfect storm in a negative way. When you realize that Credit One is one of the official banks of NASCAR, if not the official bank of NASCAR.
Right.
They've got a bunch of marketing engagement involved, including the final lap, the last lap presented by Credit One.
Yep.
You got McDonald's, which is still, I believe, the official fast food franchise in NASCAR. If not, they've got a long history in it.
Yep.
So yeah, I mean, it's not exactly as if Kyle Larson is dealing with some low-profile sponsors there.
Right, and that's that's what we need to remember is this certainly is not, and it has been. I mean, I have seen that NASCAR's caught a. NASCAR has a lot of faults. And again, what with Larson, my thought was, drive. If NASCAR wasn't so heavily with the drive for diversity, if that wasn't such a big initiative for them, I mean, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that what happened on Sunday night might have been okay, but I can tell you that, I think it's a lot of steps backwards. I mean, because if you look at our sport, we have that stereotype on us to where we kind of think that way, and there's I've heard folks say that he didn't mean it. He didn't mean it. How else do you mean it? I mean, I don't know. It's like you call somebody an asshole, you're calling them an asshole. There's not a. I guess there is a nice way to say that. We call each other assholes and whatever, but that one there, that's kind of hard to be joking around,
Yeah, it's kind of like if you call somebody an asshole, we're guilty of that time and time again, but there's just some things you cannot say. It's right on that list of stuff you cannot say, and he said it. And how he ended up using it, the direction or the tense or whatever you want to call it, the action, the direction, whatever, it's still a word you cannot say. And he said it, and he happens to be the most highly profiled NASCAR racer to get caught saying it. He's probably not the only one that's ever said it, but he's the only one that was on iRacing that got caught saying it. That's for damn sure.
And that's where, speaking of iRacing, we have to congratulate our man, Flying Ryan Luja. He wins again last night. Dude is flying, isn't he? He's from 37th, I think I saw.
37th to the win last night. It was a pretty good race. I watched. I missed the first part, having to go out and walk the new dog. His timetable is not the same timetable as I have when it comes to watching racing. So, I got to watch most of it. He had the same thing. I love the interview at the end where it sounded just like a regular interview. Well, we had tire strategy, we had pit strategy, we had everything we needed, and we went from 32nd to the lead. So. A little controversial finish there at the end of bumping that one cat up out of the way, but it happens. Just like in real world, it happens in a video game too.
Absolutely, it does. But and that's where the other question that's come up here with the Kyle Larson situation is when you get to the iRacing, this is where we talk about the virtual, what we're watching. Everything that we see is even though it's simulated, it's pretty damn simulated. It's pretty damn real life, but they do things a little different. And I saw folks saying that. Well, no, you've never listened to the NASCAR radios at the NASCAR race, listening to those guys. Well, that's why they're not on the broadcast. I mean, there's you just NASCAR has a plan in place to get Kyle Larson back there, and I think that they honestly would want him back there. He's up until Sunday night, he was a very marketable guy. My wife watched an interview with him on Race Hub last week. It was he and his wife and the kid, and he was talking about shotgunning a White Claw when they talked about Caitlin shotgunning the beer, and she's like, "That dude's pretty cool." So I mean, he's a good figure to have in there, but you can't misstep that way.
Not when you're that high profile. I mean, I think if anybody says it, if you're Carl Longs of the world say it, I don't know if it's the end all that it was for Kyle Larson, but he definitely stepped in a big old pile. He'll come back from it. I think that he'll run around in the dirt world for a little bit. I liked the stance that the World of Outlaws took on it. I thought that the World of Outlaws basically took a better stance than NASCAR did by just announcing that it was a 30-day suspension until completion of some sensitivity training and stuff like that. So I think that, to me, I think the World of Outlaws stance ended up being the better, for lack of a better term, the better story in the way in which it was handled.
Yeah.
NASCAR still said indefinitely, but I like the way that the World of Outlaws kind of laid it out a little bit better for him than the NASCAR stuff did.
Yeah, and there's absolutely no doubt when I say this, and I say this in the most sincere way, the world of Outlaws can be a little more laxed on that stance, because it isn't the the premier racing series. It's not the Cup Series. It is a great racing series, no doubt about it, and this is not at all to be anything that I'm trying to turn into dirt versus asphalt, because I mean, look, we're sitting here, we can't go to racetracks, we can't do anything, so this is not the time to be doing any of that nonsense. But the World of Outlaws, they have that little bit of flexibility right now, and for them to do that makes them look really good. I mean, it makes them look really good.
I mean, obviously, the World of Outlaws is not the premier NASCAR Cup Series. It is a premier dirt racing series by no doubt on that. But yeah, you're right. There is a difference in the stance that the two series have to have.
Yeah.
Zero tolerance for NASCAR, pretty much. I mean, it at the end of the day, it is what it is. In the worst possible scenario, in the worst possible time, especially if you're Kyle Larson, because there's nothing to talk about now except for that, except for the misstep, except for the misspeak that he had the other day. So definitely, it's definitely a sensitive topic, both for Larson, obviously, and then even for talking heads like us, because it's such a sensitive topic, no matter which way you unwrap it.
Yeah. Absolutely. And, part of that, Gina Shile Knowles has jumped on there, and she's in the chat. And one of the things that she points out, and I mean, to Larson's defense, they're not used to people hearing them. I mean, that's where this thing has there's iRacing on right now. Since I sat in the studio here, there's been iRacing on the whole time, and I've been sitting here probably for 45 minutes as we were getting ready for this. So, but again, you can't have the misstep because all the ears are on. But this is where it definitely takes. I think where iRacing comes back, it grounds it a little bit to where this really isn't, and I don't mean this as a disservice. This really isn't the real thing, and this proves the point right here, because that would not happen. That would not happen on a Sunday. No,
it wouldn't, and it'd be one of those things where clearly he probably ended up thinking that he was on his own private channel, which he probably was, but with the extra all-in access that everybody's trying to get with the iRacing, I mean, clearly that you could tell by the statement that was on his own channel.
Oh yeah,
that wasn't on the because it was on his channel, it became a public channel because of the way that they were marketing. Oh, here, listen to the live Kyle Larson stream.
Yeah. Well, he went in and he asked, can you hear me? Whatever it was. I mean, the whole thing, the way all of that went down, and seriously, I mean, oh man, again, now I better watch what I say. I mean, all of us, there's times where we say stuff And we've probably all said things that we shouldn't say, but that's where you have to be really aware of what's going on around you. And I'm not saying go out there and say these things, but anyway, it is what it is. He'll be fine. He's a great talent. Hopefully, he's offered the opportunity to get back, because guys, don't blow smoke up my skirt. The pinnacle is the NASCAR Cup Series. That's where he wants to be. I don't care what anybody says.
Well, I mean, if Art Briles can get another shot at a high school, I'm pretty sure that Kyle Larson will get another shot in the race car.
Yeah. You would hope so. You would absolutely hope so. Speaking of, we mentioned Gina there. Gina came out, had a video that was posted there, just kind of an update to everyone there with the Texas Short Track Racing Series, everything that's going on there. Well done. And the lady doesn't like being on camera or speaking in front of crowds. I can tell you that. But she did a really good job there. Just kind of an update. Remember, things are kind of in not really in her hands there. I mean, it's up to other folks to when stuff can resume. But it does seem like she's ready to act as soon as something goes down.
Mm-hmm. It was a good video. It was the best 10 minutes of my day so far, minus the 20 minutes I've spent with you so far.
And I will tell you, and again, this is solely my advice. I mean, not that my advice means anything, but what I would think, depending on all of this, let's just say that this thing is lifted. Okay, I'm not Johnny Torres. I'm not a promoter here, but let's just say that this thing is lifted. Let's say it's lifted. What is it now? May 8th here. Let's say May 15th, everything is lifted or whatever. I wouldn't suggest racing that next Saturday, because things have been dormant. I mean, guys have talked about, we've been working on cars and all of this, but do we know what's actually ready? Do we not? I'd buffer in a little bit of time there. If I were doing anything, I'd buffer in some time to make sure people were ready.
Well, I mean, I think even when we go back to racing, I think that you're going to end up seeing people sit in the grandstands with their bandanas on and all that stuff, trying to take care of themselves. And you know what? That might become the new normal. We don't know what the new normal is going to be.
Yeah.
That's the one thing that we haven't been able to figure out yet. When they talk about the schools reopening, there's plenty of people that have said, even if the school opens, I'm not letting my kid go back to school.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll have to take we'll take a look at that, and we'll touch more on that here as we get a little further in to the program. But what we do need to do, let's go to the Revved Up Sports Show hotline, because we talked about Nick Holt was going to be joining us tonight. And here, if you haven't seen it already on Lone Star Speed Zone, for folks that don't know, Nick for a long time was the motorsports writer for the San Antonio Light, and wrote really, really good stuff. And this is back in the days where this was the only way that you could consume any racing information. I can tell you, in Austin, nobody wanted to print anything. Nobody printed anything. We'd have to. My dad would go buy the San Antonio Light on Sundays and Saturdays, so we could read these columns. And 1989 was a year that was ballistic. And Nick has gone back and he's posting these on Lone Star Speed Zone. He's on the hotline. Nick, how you doing, sir?
Pretty good, Rodney. How about yourself? You staying safe?
Absolutely, my friend. Everything good here. How about you and the lovely wife? Everything good out y'all's way?
You bet. Sandy's working out of the house, and I'm sharing an office with her. So You can imagine we're ready to pull each other's hair out. So, but other than that, we're doing great.
That's awesome. Go ahead, Bobby.
So, Nick, we know your background. Nice to hear from you again. For those that are going to be introduced to you for the first time, that download the podcast and listen all over the world, talk about your background. You're not just a motorsports writer. You've done a little bit of everything and everywhere, right?
Well, it's easier to say what I haven't done in motorsports than to say what I have. I've worn a lot of hats. Probably the one that I'm most proud of is being crew chief with some pretty good drivers and working on their suspensions for 30, 40 years. and doing I also conduct suspension engineering seminars around Texas, and quite a few people that have gone to those, and I'm proud of those. So that's the thing I really put my hat on with. But like you said, I was a motorsports writer for 7 or 8 years in a major daily newspaper, and I've written for the glossy magazines, racing magazines, off and on. And but but I've also been a track official, right? And
Yeah, that's right.
track official, and the bad guy, and working with working at a couple of tracks, San Antonio, and of course Thunder Hill before it became Central Texas, and put together the Lone Star Legacy Series to try to get those guys back in order, and a few other little things like with TAMS. I worked with TAMS for a long time, and 3 or 4 different stints at San Antonio Speedway doing different things, and NASCAR Chief Steward. Anything else you can remember?
Hey, you've even done race announcing. You've been a race announcer too.
Yeah, I
That's
forgot
right.
about that. And the flag man. Yep, and the flag man. So there's really the only thing I haven't really done. Well, I was a driver, but I was awful. I was just plain awful, and all over the place. And I got out of the car and I said, "Okay, Johnny, you drive it. I'm done." And and that was the end of my driving career on asphalt. I did a little dirt driving back when I was a kid in high school. Of course, that's what 20 years ago now.
Of course, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And up in Maine, they plowed a field.
Yeah.
And they asked somebody if he wanted to be the flag man, and then some lady would pass the hat. They collect a purse, and there wasn't a seatbelt. I was the only car that had a seatbelt.
Nice.
Yeah, and nobody else had one. That was high tech,
Yeah.
and football helmet, and that was blue jeans and tennies, and that was about it. And raced around in old jalopies.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just had a blast, and it got in my, when you race, I don't care what you race, it gets in your blood.
Yeah. Yeah. It really does. And it's hard to
It does, and you should know that. You too. You can't shake it either.
Yeah, can't get rid
We've
of
been
it.
trying. We can't.
Hey, hey, Nick, one of our colleagues, Jacqueline Drake, that's been on this show lots of times here with us in the recent past. She checks in, said you interviewed her when she was in the late models, and now she's
yeah, I did
doing her thing.
I've got some TV stuff, that we did for a while when we were at Central Tech. Well, actually, Thunder Hill. We did some TV stuff for Lone Star Speed Zone, and those were kind of fun. And we interviewed quite a few people, actually.
Yeah.
And you can get on Lone Star Speed Zone on the Facebook page, and they can see some of those that we put up on the Facebook page.
Yep. Absolutely.
It's always fun. I think I interviewed you maybe once, didn't I?
I think so. Yeah. I think
I've got one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there you go. You're both famous now. I tell you.
Both famous. talking to Nick Holt. So Nick, let's and the nice thing is, folks can go to LoneStarSpeedZone.com, and you have gone back and you are posting all of your articles. I mean, talk about quarantine time. I mean, going back in there and finding all of this stuff, and I'm reading through all of this, and I remember a lot of it. But so as I was going, you started posting about 1989. And it's
well, actually, we started in 87.
87.
We had one column in 87 that was about something at Texas World Speedway.
Yep.
And then somebody borrowed the results from that, and I never found it, so I don't have that article up. And then we did all of 1988.
Yeah.
But the big year, just like you said, is 89. I've still got to post 90, 91, and 92. And the rest of them, I'm not sure where I can even find them. But I found that many, so it'll probably be about 600 or 700 articles up by the time I got them all posted. I'm sure that people will just spend the next 4 or 5 months going through those one at a time.
Well, I sure as heck know I will, Nick. I promise you that. But so let's rewind it. So just to kind of set the tone, and a lot of this, every track and series was affected, is what I kept posting, because as I've gone and read this, and again, we didn't have all of this access that we have now, where you can just flip on Twitter and Facebook and all of this and see everything. But just to kind of, San Antonio is kind of where we'll set our story. So San Antonio Highway 16 Raceway had been built by Don Bierswall and a bunch of investors, and at one point, Pan American closes down, and then Joe Horn. So talk a little bit how Joe Horn kind of starts this whole story off.
Well, he does in '89 anyway. Before that, he'd been in the seat. Well, let's go back, like you said. Bierswall and a group of investors got really upset with Ricky Ware, who had Pan American Speedway for years and years and years. And some of the drivers were really upset because Ricky had promised that a certain percentage of the gate would go back into some fund or go into the purse. And well, the Drivers Association got together and they decided that they were going to count the number of people that came in the gate. And so they did. And then they called Ricky and said, Ricky, you're cheating us, blah, blah, blah. And one thing led to another, and a group of them got together, and they got Don Bergeval, who owns a couple, 3, 4 nursing homes, funeral homes here in San Antonio. And they got together, and Don said he'd lead the group. And so they all invested whatever they invested, some a lot, some a little, but they all became partners, and they leased some property on Highway 16, about 4 or 5 miles south of San Antonio, and from a family. And the lease was supposed to be eternal, or 100 years or something like that. And it was non-transferable. So these guys, they owned the lease, and they put up a racetrack and all the infrastructure. And it really was a beautiful track. It was a half mile, as you know, just a great track. And like a paperclip, basically, with real sharp turns, real high bank, and long straightaways. So you can really get in there, but it placed a real premium on handling, that's for sure. But anyway, Bergeval and troops did a great job, and Terry Labonte was the first track champion there. And, you know, it just had a real good start. And I know we had a race car that we brought there. Me and my buddy Johnny Ivy got together and put together a race car, a little 4-cylinder class as a Vega, and we had stock spindles on it. And boy, we were really ripping. That little Vega motor would go, and we were ripping down the front straightaway one night. And about the time we went into turn one, that right front hub just kind of said, that's enough.
Yep.
And we went into the first turn about, however fast that Vega was going, with no brakes.
Oh,
and
fun ride.
Oh yeah, just hit that wall. Actually, we hit the wall before it actually became a launching pad. As you know, it became one.
Yeah.
But it was solid then, and we hit it head on, and that was the end of that car. And it ended up in Newell Savage, and a lot of cars ended up like that.
Oh yeah.
Because we weren't ready. We were on a little quarter mile at Pan Am, where the G forces were. Maybe we got up to 0.8 or 9. But you go in at turn one in San Antonio, you're pulling 1.2 or you're losing.
Oh yeah.
And so you hit that wall pretty hard, as you know, many people have. And Newell Salvage pretty much made a fortune off from race cars at San Antonio. Just on that. Yeah. Anyway, the track started going downhill a little bit. The team itself started to get fractured in the sense that some of the stakeholders had kids that raced, and some of them had nephews that raced, and some of them wanted to have their kid be a NASCAR star, and there started to be a little bit of, problems within that tight-knit little racing community. Like most tight-knit racing communities, they have little squabbles, or in this case, big squabbles. And things, so I ain't racing at your damn track. Well, it's your track. No, it's not. Damn it, go to hell, and all that stuff. And next thing you know, the car counts are going down, and Don Beerswell is no longer the big hero like most track promoters. He was the bad guy, and he got tired of that, and he sold the track to a used car dealer from the south side of San Antonio, Joe Horn. He owned a place called Paget Motors down there on South Florida Street.
Yep.
And what he would do, he'd buy a bunch of little wrecks, and he'd sell them on his used car lot and put them in time, to sell it to some poor guy. And as soon as they missed a payment, they'd send one of his troops out to repo the car. That car paid for itself many, many, many times. And
didn't know that.
He got rich off them. Yeah, he got rich off from people that were just kind of poor and got sucked in.
Wow.
Anyway. He was a master, though, and you never felt that you were really getting messed over. I could have used a different word, but I didn't. And you were getting messed over for sure. And but people just kind of liked Joe. He was a good guy, and he really is a good guy. If you got to know him, he was just a wonderful guy. But he didn't